planes where they could get caught in an engine and cause a crash.
Yes, and we talked about the controlled airspace around Wellington Airport being closed for 30 minutes after a drone was spotted at the right height or wrong height.
Yeah, so we have all those, rules about people pointing laser pointers at planes and stuff like that, don't we? But we don't seem to have proper rules about drones and where they can fly and where they can't fly. Or punishment for it.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. A texter said, I'll bet Changi Airport doesn't have a problem with drones. And it doesn't seem to, just Googling. And in Singapore, unauthorised conduct of aerial activities in restricted areas sees people fined up to $20,000 for a start, and then after that $40,000 in imprisonment. So are we too soft trying to find these drone flyers and tell them off?
We may be, or a drone flyer is not even aware of the consequences. I must admit, originally when I thought about drones and airplanes, I thought planes are so big, drones are so small. But then you think about it in terms of what a drone could do if it was sucked into an engine, or a drone at a window, and you realise actually...
A bird can do that, so a drone.
Exactly right.
Yeah. They need to be registered, don't they? It should be something that you have to register to be the owner of. You can't. It shouldn't just be that you can go into Dick Smith or whatever. Not Dick Smith now, but a shop and buy a drone and get up there and start playing.
In the same kind of way that if you own a gun, the owner, I think, is registered.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I had a lot of texts coming about drones, and I saved a few of them, but they've now disappeared. They've taken flight. But basically, it is the proverbial, as we said yesterday, seems to be the proverbial accident waiting to happen. And there have been more collisions or near collisions in 2018 overseas, and we've had a couple too, than ever before. So it would seem logical, actually, to get ready for the worst or try and obviate the worst.
And presumably obviating it lies somewhere in the technology behind drones, because is it possible that you can sort of depower drones in certain areas, or are there ways that actually drone manufacturers can...
I think you can override the drone. The drone might tell you it's flying near an airport, or you're flying it near an airport, but you can override that, so they don't have that kind of GPS control over and stopping the drone coming in yet, as far as I understand.
But presumably this is a worldwide challenge, not just a Kiwi problem, obviously. So I imagine lots of people are giving thoughts to the issue. It's cold comfort if you happen to be in a plane and see a drone.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be the case of all of the action happens after there's been some catastrophe, right?
People are telling me burglars use drones.
Really? How?
Well, presumably to scope.
Oh, over the fence.
I suppose so. Lots of properties. You'd think they'd be noticed flying a drone and hovering next to your windows, wouldn't you? I've got one more quick topic. Hillary Clinton will run for president again, says a former advisor to the Clintons in the Wall Street Journal. Hillary 4.0. So Hillary 2.0 lost to Barack and 3.0 lost to Donald Trump, but she'll be back.
I presume this is fake news, Jim. I think...
No, I don't think it is fake news.
You think it's real?
Well,
yeah?
he reckons she's determined. She's learned from all those past agonies, and she's put it all together in a formidable package, and she's going to be back.
No, why would she do it? Why would she put herself up for another hammering?
Interesting,
she's got too much baggage, I think. You know?
Okay.
They just need Michelle to run. Then it'll all be sweet.
Michelle Obama?
Yeah, obviously.
And looking at her autobiography, I think that's the last thing that's going to happen, sadly.
She's far too smart to do it.
Exactly right.
Which is a tragedy, but wouldn't it be amazing?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Nikki Bazant, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Lovely to see you.
And Chris Clark, nice to see you.
Thank you, Jim.
We're back with the panel again tomorrow. Thank you so much for your company again, everybody. And Checkpoint is on the way.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the mother of convicted drug smuggler Karel Sroubek makes an emotional plea for the Immigration Minister to give her son one last chance and let him stay in New Zealand once he's released from jail. Speaking exclusively to Checkpoint, Mila says her son is not a gangster and is paying for his mistakes behind bars.
I love my son and I wish him better life in the future, safe life, because he is not a bad person.
Karel Sroubek's mother also raises serious concerns about the way she says her son's case is being used to score political points. That story and much more.
RNZ News at 5. No mai haere mai. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. The mother of convicted drug smuggler Karel Sroubek has confirmed her son returned to the Czech Republic despite claiming he'd be in danger if forced to return home. In an exclusive interview with Checkpoint, Sroubek's mother says he made the trip in 2009 and was in his homeland for a single night before she insisted he leave for his own safety. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, has been under intense political pressure over his decision not to deport Sroubek and has ordered a review. The former kickboxer is serving more than 5 years in jail for drug trafficking. Sroubek's mother, Mila, has told Checkpoint that her son made an impulsive and foolish decision to return to the Czech Republic because he missed his family. She says he made the trip in 2009 using the identity of Jan Antonik to protect himself and was in the country for just over 24 hours before going to Germany. Sroubek and his family claim he can't be deported back to the Czech Republic because he witnessed a murder there and his life could be at risk from people angry he gave evidence in the case. A leading judge fears the ongoing industrial dispute between the Ministry of Justice and its staff may lead to a miscarriage of justice. The standoff has disrupted court proceedings for months as the Ministry of Justice negotiates a new contract with the union. Sitting hours in some courthouses are being slashed in half, holding up cases and keeping people in custody longer. The Chief District Court Judge, Jean-Marie Doug, is worried the dispute is causing unwarranted delays.
We want to avoid people being held in custody for undue periods of time. That is a breach of their natural rights. We want people to be able to appear and have their bail applications heard as soon as possible. For them not to do so, that is a breach of their human rights.
The Chief District Court Judge, Jean-Marie Doug. The Prime Minister's office has confirmed that abuse victims in all religious schools will be included in the Royal Commission. The inquiry will include the experiences of children, young people and vulnerable adults from 1950 to 1999. Emma Hatton reports.
Survivor groups have been questioning whether widening the inquiry to include abuse in faith-based institutions would be as inclusive as it should be. A spokesperson for the network of survivors of faith-based institutional abuse, Liz Tonks, says the majority of victims were under the legal guardianship and care of their parents, but attending church schools during the day when the abuse happened. The Prime Minister's office has since confirmed that all faith-based schools are indeed included. The Royal Commission is currently reviewing the new terms of reference and a series of public announcements will be made in due course about how the inquiry will run. This is Emma Hatton.
The inquiry into the Earthquake Commission will not focus on attributing blame. The Greater Christchurch Regeneration Minister Megan Woods has announced Dame Sylvia Cartwright as the head of the inquiry into the Earthquake Commission. The inquiry will look at how insurance claims were handled by EQC and, as appropriate, other insurers. Dame Sylvia Cartwright says this is a chance for people and institutions to say where things might have gone wrong and what needs to be fixed.
This will not be an inquiry about reputations or about liability at all. It's simply a way of finding out enough information to be able to make recommendations in terms of the terms of reference.
Sylvia Cartwright says she will also be seeking out people who she feels she needs to speak to. A local who lives 200 metres away from a fatal fiery crash in the central North Island says it was a shocking scene. Emergency services were called at about 2:30 this morning after a car and a heavy truck crashed on State Highway 1 north of Atiamuri. The driver of the car died. Local resident Gillian Curley heard a loud bang and arrived to see the car stuck under the truck. She says a fast-developing fire prevented her from getting close to the vehicles.
It's just a sheet of flame up the front of the truck, and the car was well involved within a couple of minutes. Even getting fire extinguishers, you wouldn't have been able to contain the fire.
Mrs. Curley says the truck driver who survived told her the driver of the car had come across the centre line and lost control going round a corner. The death toll in the Californian wildfires has risen to 42 and more than 200 are still missing. The worst fires in the history of the state are continuing to rage. The BBC's Paul Verkaman reports.
In Northern California, the deadly campfire is the most destructive in state history. Crews found people dead in their houses or in their cars, too late to escape the flames. Now a desperate search to find or identify the missing. In Southern California, the hill and fast-moving Woolsey fires burn. There have been months of no rain, and warm, high winds have fanned the flames. Crews fear the fires may get worse before they can get fully contained.
Paul Verkaman in Los Angeles there. It's 5 minutes past 5. On to sport. New Zealand football has formally apologised to the Football Ferns for the behaviour of their former coach Andreas Heraf. 4 members of New Zealand football's executive committee met the team this morning after a review which found Heraf engaged in bullying behaviour. Veteran football Fern Sarah Gregorius says it was emotional at times.
It's really honest and open, and I certainly felt for myself that it was really heartfelt, and I think the beginning of a different type of relationship compared to the one we've had in the past. I think we've never had that many members of EXCO, even in the environment before, and definitely not speaking as frankly as we were this morning. So no, it was really great.
Sarah Gregorius. The team is preparing for next week's OFC Nations Cup in New Caledonia. The New Zealand men's rugby sevens coach Clark Laidlaw says Nico Jones has plenty of the qualities his father Sir Michael displayed during his rugby career. Nico Jones has been given a sevens contract but won't be considered for the first 2 rounds of the World Series because of school exams. Laidlaw says, like his father, Nico has plenty of raw power.
His ability to carry the ball and break tackles. I suppose Michael was one of those first real genuine power athletes that played the game, wasn't he? So, he's following similar steps, but he'll be pretty keen to carve his own game out and get his own attributes on the field.
Clark Laidlaw there, and that's the news.
Abuse survivors ready to speak up.
He was made to scrub a tennis court with a toothbrush and a whole heap of other things. Within 2 weeks of getting back to Auckland, he'd become part of a gang.
Chaos in California's wildfires.
Hitting other vehicles, falling telephone poles. Once the road is blocked, you're in big trouble.
And e-scooters head for Wellington.
So juicers will harvest the limes at 9 o'clock. Every scooter below 85% becomes available.
Bringing you up to speed. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, is reading online changing how our brains work? And after 10, best-selling New Zealand author Deborah Challenor on her new novel From the Ashes. Join me, Lynn Freeman, in for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now from Met Service to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland and Auckland, fine today. A few showers tomorrow. Waikato and Coromandel, fine spells, isolated showers. Waitomo to Whanganui, including the Central High Country, also Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine spells. Showers during the afternoons and evenings, especially inland. Some heavy with isolated thunderstorms and hail. Manawatu to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Nelson and Bulla, mostly fine. Areas of cloud morning and night, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Westland, mostly sunny. Fiordland, fine today, cloudy tomorrow, patchy drizzle. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, areas of cloud morning and night, otherwise fine. However, isolated showers inland during the afternoons and evenings. Southland, mostly sunny, and at the Chathams, fine spells. It's 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome to Checkpoint. Tonight we can confirm the convicted drug smuggler at the centre of a highly political immigration stoush did return to the Czech Republic, despite claiming his life may be in danger if he was forced to go home. Karel Sroubek's mother has spoken exclusively to Checkpoint. She says her son made an impulsive decision, he desperately missed his family and wasn't thinking straight when he made the trip. Mila says her son made the 2009 trip using his assumed identity of Jan Antalik and not his real name. The Immigration Minister is currently reviewing his controversial decision to allow Karel Sroubek to stay in New Zealand after new information about the case came to light. Sroubek is serving more than 5 years in jail for trafficking ecstasy. Mila came to New Zealand for her son's parole hearing and she remains here on a visitor's visa. She thinks he's being used as a political football and is begging Ian Lees-Galloway to give her son one last chance to prove himself. Mila's English is very limited, so we used a Czech translator to translate her words. Is your son a gangster?
Ne, v žádném případě není gangster.
No, not at all. He is not a gangster.
Gangstra se s něj snaží udělat média.
Media are trying to make him a gangster. He is not a gangster. No way.
Why do you say that?
Protože jsem o tom přesvědčena a neexistují.
Because I am convinced about it, and because there is no proof, and a gangster is something totally different than my son is.
What do you think will happen to him if he is sent home to the Czech Republic?
Já si to vůbec nedokážu ani nechci.
Oh, I can't and even don't want to imagine that it is a terrible...
What do you mean by that?
Protože on svědčil proti člověku, který zavraždil a bylo mu před bezprostředně po tom, co se to stalo.
Because he acted as a witness against a person who murdered. Minutes after it happened, he gave his testimony about it to police, and they immediately...
Potom následně byl nucený, bylo mu vyhrožováno, aby tu výpověď změnil.
He was immediately threatened to change his testimony so that the person who committed it, that his sentence would be lowered.
Do you think your son will be physically hurt if he goes home?
Yeah, I am worried. A já se obávám, že ano.
I am afraid, yes.
A máme proto i důkazy, ale indicie, které tomu...
We have indications it would most probably happen.
S největší pravděpodobností došlo.
What would happen? Do you believe he would be killed?
I ta možnost.
Even that could happen.
You really believe that?
Pravdu tomu věřím.
I really believe
Takových
that.
případů je v České republice hodně.
There are many cases like that in the Czech Republic.
So as a mother, how does that make you feel?
Zoufale. Jsem úplně už ztrácím víru a...
Terribly. I am trying to keep hope, but I am losing my strength and hope.
Did your son come home to the Czech Republic in 2009? Did he return home?
Bylo to bez našeho vědomí, bylo to na velmi krátkou dobu. Ta cesta byla.
It was without our knowing. It was for a short time and it was to Germany.
Did he come to the Czech Republic though from Germany?
Byl to jeho okamžitý, neuvážený nápad. Prostě se mu zastesklo po domovu, což na jednu stranu chápu, ale...
It was his impulsive decision at that moment because he was very homesick, but we insisted that he immediately return to Germany.
To be clear, Mila, did he come into the Czech Republic?
Přijel na krátkou dobu.
He did, for a short time.
Ale bez našeho souhlasu.
But without our consent.
What name did he travel with?
To byl asi ten hlavní důvod, proč to udělal, protože cestoval pod jménem Jan Antolik a pod jinou identitou.
He travelled under someone else's identity, Jan Antolik, and that was the main reason why. And it also offered a little bit of cover.
How long did he stay in the Czech Republic for?
Přes jednu noc a druhý den.
One night and he left the next day.
Back to Germany?
Back to Germany.
Can you understand that this looks bad, Mila?
Ano, ano.
Yes.
Ale bylo mu v té době, nevím už přesně kolik, byl mladý a prostě k mládí patří nerozvážnost a
He was young back then and he didn't think straight.
Ale umím se i vžít do toho jeho pocitu, prostě, že se mu opravdu
I can understand his feelings and that he was homesick and wanted to visit his home even for a short time.
Do you think if he comes home with his real name, that is different?
Samozřejmě, absolutně.
Of course, absolutely. And we don't trust the justice nor the police that they would be able to protect him.
What is happening with his relationship with his wife?
Jeho manželka si našla jiného partnera a synovi oznámila, že už a podala žádost o...
His wife found another person, she has got another partner and told my son she doesn't want to live with him anymore and filed for divorce.
The new partner, does he have political connections?
Yes, yes.
What political connections?
Je členem Národní strany.
He is a member of the National Party in New Zealand.
What's his name?
Mark Davey.
Mark Davey.
Why do you think your son's case has got so political?
Na začátku to určitě pro jeho ženu a jejího partnera je to jejich osobní zájem, který ale posloužil k tomu, aby...
In the beginning it was personal interest of my son's wife and her new partner, but then it became political because the National Party now can use it to increase pressure on the current minister.
Mila, if you could speak to the Minister of Immigration, say why your son should be allowed to stay here.
Chtěla bych ho poprosit, aby mu dal poslední šanci, aby mohl dokázat, že není gangster, že není...
I would ask the minister to give him one last chance to prove that he is not a gangster.
Pokud něco udělal, tak za to piká a snaží se...
That he is not a bad person. And if he did anything, he is now paying the consequences and he is trying to straighten all that up.
Aby zůstal ne na jeho straně, protože opravdu mu reálně hrozí nebezpečí a potřebuje někoho, kdo mu pomůže.
It is also because he is really in danger and he needs some help to keep his life, and that his life is not just a ball that is used for political gains.
Is your son scared?
Ano.
Yes, he is scared. I am too, and my husband as well.
So, your son is a convicted drug dealer. Many people will think he does not deserve to live in New Zealand. What do you say to that?
Mně je to strašně líto, že se něco takového stalo a těžko tomu jako máma
I am very sorry for that. It is very hard for me as a mother to believe that. But since he was convicted, I have to accept it.
Ale věřím, že pokud to opravdu udělal, tak že si z toho ty následky...
But if he really did something like that, he is paying the consequences. And he probably reconsidered everything in his head and wouldn't do anything like that again.
I know English is hard for you, Mila, but could you try just in a few words in English to tell me your feelings for your son?
I love my son as every parent, and I wish him better life in the future, safe life with loved partner, and change his life forever. Forever. He is not bad person. I'm sorry for...
And that is Karel Sroubek's mother, Mila, speaking to us there through a Czech translator. Now, Checkpoint has made repeated attempts to contact Karel Sroubek's wife and her new partner, Mark Davey. They haven't responded to our text messages or emails. National Party MPs Michael Woodhouse and Mark Mitchell say they do not know Mark Davey. We also contacted National Party President Peter Goodfellow, but he didn't respond to our attempts to reach him. Mark Davey stood in the 2016 Auckland local body elections on the centre-right ticket of Auckland Future. Now, that is connected with the National Party and at the time was backed by former National Party presidents. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, also declined to be interviewed. The Chief District Court judge says ongoing strikes throughout the country's courts may result in a miscarriage of justice. Industrial action has disrupted court proceedings for months as the Ministry of Justice tries to negotiate a new contract with the PSA. Sitting hours in some courts are being slashed in half, holding up cases and keeping people in custody longer. Our court reporter, Annika Smith, filed this report.
The hustle and bustle of courthouses has hushed in recent months, and not because Christmas is fast approaching. More than 2,000 PSA members have periodically walked off the job amid work-to-rule action over stalled negotiations with the Ministry of Justice. Chief District Court Judge Jan-Marie Doog, who is independent from the ministry and its employees, says hearings are being delayed and people are being held in custody longer than they should be. She says she's extremely concerned.
We want to avoid people being held in custody for undue periods of time. That is a breach of their natural rights. We want people to be able to appear and have their bail applications heard as soon as possible. For them not to do so, that is a breach of their human rights.
Judge Doog says victims and their families are also finding themselves stuck in the system.
We want participants to be able to come and tell their stories and have their trials when their trials have been scheduled for some time. For them not to do so, there may very well be a miscarriage of justice arising out of undue delay.
The president of the Criminal Bar Association, Len Anderson, says the industrial dispute is wreaking havoc on an already busy justice system.
You have probably about 6 hours of hearing time in a day, and the industrial action has reduced that to something like 2.5 hours. So basically, for each day that the strike goes on, we have half a day of extra work further down the track. It is a situation that's very concerning.
He says lawyers are conflicted over the strike action.
Lawyers are generally sympathetic to the court staff, who they see as not being particularly well paid for positions that have a great deal of responsibility. However, the concerns that the lawyers have is with the people appearing before the court.
Last Wednesday, union workers walked off the job for a half-day strike, closing 19 courthouses from Gore to Kaitaia. It followed the ministry's failed bid for an injunction on short-notice strikes at the Employment Court. Judge Doog says judges are already taking measures to counter the disruption, but she'll soon be forced to make tough calls about what cases to prioritise. This could mean non-jury trials are put off until next year to make room for sentencings.
Judges are distressed. They don't like to see people being disrupted, and they don't like to see people potentially being in the system for far longer than they should be. And they, at a human level, are distressed by what is occurring.
The ministry has offered a 6% increase over the next 2 years, in line with other agreements in the public sector. The ministry's chief operating officer, Karel Sroubek, says he's committed to reaching a settlement, but Glenn Barclay of the Public Service Association says the union won't return to the negotiating table until the ministry ups the offer.
I think that they really do need to stop and think about how they can change the frame here for the talks to resume, and I'm hopeful that they are turning their minds to that, and that they will hear our call to resume negotiations, and hopefully we'll hear from them soon.
For now, Judge Jan-Marie Doog says there's no doubt that the longer the strike action goes on, the more difficult it will be for the justice system to recover. For Checkpoint, this is Annika Smith.
At least 42 people have now died and hundreds remain unaccounted for as the deadliest wildfires in the history of California continue to rage across the state. 5 separate fires are now burning as the winds continue to rise, spelling bad news for the thousands of firefighters trying to bring them under control. The most destructive blaze remains the Camp Fire in Northern California, but others are torching properties north of Los Angeles. Alex Perrottet reports.
The charred remains of burnt-out vehicles and homes in Northern California. Authorities say the Camp Fire in Butte County, one of 3 major fires burning across the state, caught residents in the town of Paradise off guard. Some were forced to abandon their cars and flee the fire on foot, whilst others were not so lucky and perished in their cars. More than 40 lives have been lost and hundreds are still missing. At the southern end of the state, the Woolsey fire has doubled in size with hot, dry winds whipping up the blaze. 250,000 people in Malibu, Los Angeles and Ventura counties have been forced to evacuate. Los Angeles Fire Chief Darrell Osby said the fire was now 32 kilometres long and 22 wide.
Right now, we have an estimate that we have 370 structures that have been lost on this fire right now. We still have our damage assessment crews out trying to make additional assessments in relation to structures damaged or lost.
Malibu residents Tony and Shari Haynes put on scuba tanks to breathe.
There was no evacuation or there was no notification.
It came so fast that it was not enough time to really coordinate a good response.
It's not their fault. They couldn't possibly be everywhere at once.
The couple has lived in Malibu since 1963.
When the firestorm came over the hill here, and it was about 60 mile an hour plus, turned pitch black, and the firestorm came over. After that, just ran around and put out fires.
Another resident, Devon DeMatteo, counted herself among the lucky ones.
We have a lot of friends that their houses are gone. All Malibu Park is gone. We're very lucky. We only had one house in our family that didn't make it, and that's my mom's boyfriend's.
The fire service is warning residents across the state to be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice.
But what I can say, and I want to re-emphasize, is that I had an opportunity to speak to my peers from Northern California in the camp incident, and unfortunately, right now they have over 20 fatalities, and that number will probably rise significantly. And there's a lot of examples in that incident where people waited to evacuate at the last minute. So hopefully that's lessons learned for people here in this region, that there's a fire, leave immediately, do not wait for an evacuation order.
More than 8,000 firefighters are battling multiple fires across the state, with authorities warning conditions are not expected to improve until later in the week. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
A South Waikato woman says she felt totally helpless as she watched a car go up in flames after it crashed into a truck on State Highway 1 north of Taupo. One person died in the crash, which happened around 2:30 near Aotea Moody this morning. Gillian Curley told our reporter Andrew McCrae that she lives a couple of hundred metres from the crash site and she heard a loud bang.
Well, of course, we were asleep and woke up to a tremendous plastic type bang, because vehicles are plastic these days, and you get to know noises on the road and think that's not a good noise, sounds like an accident. So we bailed out of bed, got dressed, jumped in the ute and took off down the road and came across the accident. And at first we were hoping it was just a blowout from the truck, and saw the debris on the road and realised it was parts of a car, and came past the truck just as the flames were getting started on the car, and the truck driver was still in the truck, and I guess he was gathering his things, and he bailed out of the truck just as we got out of the car, and he was able to run and say it's going to blow. So we all moved back a bit further, and flames were up over the cab of his truck, and you could see that there no way that anyone could survive in that car, and you hope they didn't because of the fire.
So from the time you heard the bang and got there, a few minutes would have passed.
2 minutes, time enough to scrabble around finding clothes and getting in the ute and driving down. Yeah.
Was the driver of the truck having difficulty getting out of his truck?
Not when we saw him. He basically bailed. He opened the door and he jumped and ran. So I guess he was stunned. I can't speak for him. And just thought to grab his bag and personal belongings and got out because it was getting a bit hot in there.
How close could you get to
You couldn't. Once you saw the flames and it's petrol, I guess the fumes took off, and it was just a sheet of flame up the front of the truck, and once it got over the cab and hit the refrigerant at the back, that just worked its way along the truck, and the car was well involved within a couple of minutes, even getting fire extinguishers, you wouldn't have been able to contain the fire. It was just too fast.
So I guess you were standing there, but you would be feeling pretty sort of hopeless, really.
Totally, yeah. Not pleasant to watch. Could only support the truck driver, who did an incredible job of keeping the unit on the road, considering he had no steering. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse than it was.
Did he say anything to you about what had happened?
Just the guy had come across the centre line, lost it on the corner and came on sideways.
And that was Gillian Curley speaking to our reporter Andrew McRae about a fatal crash that happened on State Highway 1 near Atiamuri early this morning. The police have yet to release the name of the person killed or confirm the cause of the crash. And coming up, taxpayers foot the bill for 400,000 seedlings that have gone to waste in Northland. Dame Sylvia Cartwright will chair an independent public inquiry into EQC, and fans marvel at the legacy left by Stan Lee after the father of Spider-Man and Hulk dies aged 95. We'd love your feedback on our interview with Karel Sroubek's mother, the 400,000 wasted seedlings, or anything else you'd like to comment on. You can text us on 2101 on the text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us at Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Paul Brennan with the news.
Thanks, Lisa. The mother of drug smuggler Karel Sroubek has confirmed he went back to the Czech Republic, despite claiming his life would be in danger if deported. Sroubek's mother has told Checkpoint he was home for a single night in 2009 before she insisted he leave for his own safety. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, has been under intense political pressure over his decision not to deport Sroubek and has ordered a review of the case. The Chief District Court judge fears a continuing industrial dispute between the Ministry of Justice and its staff may lead to a miscarriage of justice. For months, the standoff has disrupted court proceedings, halving sitting hours in some courthouses and keeping people in custody longer. Judge Jean-Marie Doug says it's a breach of their natural rights to hold people in custody for undue periods of time. The Prime Minister's office has confirmed that abuse victims of all religious schools will be included in the Royal Commission. The inquiry will cover the experiences of children, young people and vulnerable adults in state care and in faith-based schools from 1950 to 1999. Dame Sylvia Cartwright says the inquiry into the Earthquake Commission will not focus on attributing blame. She is the newly announced head of the inquiry to investigate how insurance claims were handled by EQC and other insurers where appropriate. Dame Sylvia says she will also be seeking out people who she feels she needs to speak to. A local who lives near the site of a fiery fatal crash in the central North Island says it was a shocking scene. Emergency services were called at about 2:30 this morning after a car and truck crashed on State Highway 1 north of Atiamuri. The driver of the car died. Gillian Curley says she heard a loud bang and arrived to see the car stuck under the truck. The US President has declared a major disaster in California and is ordering federal aid to help recovery efforts in the worst wildfire in the history of the state. The remains of another 13 people have been found in Northern California, bringing the total death toll in and around the town of Paradise to 42. And that's the news.
Thanks, Paul. See you again at 6. Madison Reedy joins us now for business. You've got an update. eBert Construction, so it went belly up, owing about $33 million to its subbies. Where's it at?
So we had an update this morning. The PwC receivers of eBert Construction, liquidators have since been appointed, but these are the initial receivers who were, as we reported very early on, they were given that the receivers put that report on the construction sites. That was when subbies couldn't get into and get their tools. So we had that update today from the High Court. So the PwC receivers had to go to the High Court because this was the first construction firm failure since a new construction law came into place, which required all construction firms to put some money aside called retention funds in a little protected trust account to pay subcontractors, which are trades workers, in the case of failure, which so happened to eBert just a few months ago.
So it was supposed to be ring-fenced money, wasn't it, in case of a situation like this? And so they'd get something.
Yeah, so the money money was absolutely ring-fenced, but what this High Court judgment has found is that there wasn't enough money in it. We already knew that. So this fund had about $3.7 million within it. The subcontractors are owed collectively about $9.3 million. What the High Court judgment also said is that only 131 out of the 152 subcontractors owed that money can actually make claims to access it. So 21 subcontractors miss out, but I spoke to the eBert receiver today, and Lara Bennett from PwC, she said that those claims aren't that significant, but they have contacted them today and told them that they've missed out.
Okay. Infratil has opened its books for the first time in 6 months?
Yeah, so Infratil is an infrastructure investor listed in the on the New Zealand Stock Exchange. So they released their half-year financial result today. Pretty strong, so definitely better than last year as well. So their net parent surplus is up 47% in the 6 months in the first half of this financial year compared to the same 6-month period last year. So they've reported $58.5 million on their books compared to about $38 million last year. And that increase is due to their investments paying off. So they've obviously made some good choices there. And they've actually invested another $302 million in this past 6 months as well. Most of that is into their own energy interests. The rest is into transport, and then a little inkling there into a new data centre in Canberra. They still have about $320 million left in bank facilities. That's debt that they can invest in other things. So they've got a bit of a treasure trove there to still make some fun decisions with.
To spend up a storm with. And the markets?
The NZX Top 50 Index fell today again, so that's 1.1%. That's about a 95-point drop to close at 8,862. The New Zealand dollar's buying at 67.4 US cents, 93.5 to the Australian, and 52.3 British pence.
And you've got an update on something else we talked about the other day, CBL Insurance, was it?
Yes, so yesterday we spoke about CBL Insurance, which finally went into liquidation at the Reserve Bank's request. They requested for that to happen in the High Court in February. The Reserve Bank, I interviewed them last night when I left the studio, so I didn't get to talk about that last night, but I will today. They've also provided me with their affidavit that they gave to the court in October, which is about 143 pages of evidence.
Sitting here on the desk, and it's a good few centimetres thick, isn't it?
It's a whopper, and I did have to read it, believe it or not. So basically within this, they outlined that CBL Insurance did act insolvently, which meant that its liabilities were larger than its assets. So if it had to pay out all of its deals and insurance claims that it couldn't have. So they've outlined what those payments were offshore in this affidavit. And Toby Fines, the head of Prudential Supervision at the Reserve Bank, who I spoke to last night, he said that the liquidators who were appointed yesterday from McGrath-Nicol could claw back some of that money, but I asked to interview them and they declined that request.
All right, thanks for the update. That's Madison Reedy with our business news there. An independent inquiry into the Earthquake Commission will not be pointing fingers at those responsible for failings. Instead, it'll be focusing on what can be done better in the future. EQC is frequently criticised for unresolved claims from the Canterbury quakes, as well as botched repair jobs. The Greater Christchurch Regeneration Minister, Megan Woods, announced the terms of reference for the inquiry this morning in Christchurch. Katie Todd reports.
The inquiry was first announced in May this year, and this morning Dame Sylvia Cartwright was named as the inquiry chair. It will look into what went wrong within EQC after the earthquakes of 2010 and 2011, including how thousands of Christchurch homeowners ended up with unresolved claims and botched repair jobs. Dame Sylvia Cartwright says the process will not operate like a court and isn't a search for scapegoats.
This will not be an inquiry about reputations or about liability at all. It's simply a way of finding out enough information to be able to make recommendations in terms of the terms of reference.
People who are unhappy with the EQC process are invited to make submissions, but Megan Woods was quick to hose down expectations that the inquiry would address their claims.
Certainly more than welcome and are encouraged to share their experiences, but they need to do it on the understanding that their individual claim won't be intervened with as a matter of them giving evidence to the inquiry.
Ms Woods says she is sure the controversial repair program managed by Fletcher will be one of the big issues raised, but it's not the forum for that.
What I won't be asking Dame Sylvia to do is determine liability around that contract. I will be asking her to listen to the experiences of people who had their homes repaired through that contract, but this isn't the forum for determining liability or otherwise in terms of that contract.
But the National Party EQC spokesperson, Stuart Smith, says the inquiry is a waste of time and money. He says a more effective system was trialled after the 2016 Kaikoura quake, where insurers were able to act as EQC agents in settling claims. The inquiry will compare the two different processes, but Mr Smith says the government simply needs to make the one used in Kaikoura the norm.
What on earth more is going to come out in a inquiry? Who knows? I can't see anything practical coming out other than people telling them to get on and do what they should do.
Christchurch homeowner and insurance advocate Ellie Jones says the inquiry looks promising. Dame Sylvia does have the power to compel people to answer questions, and Ms Jones says she hopes the former Canterbury Rebuild Minister, Jerry Brownlee, is one of those called forward.
But I think there are quite a lot of people I'd quite like to see and hear from in front of her for this inquiry, and I think those people should stand up and should speak up, and we need to hear what they have to say about some of the issues that we've been wanting answers to for quite some time.
Jerry Brownlee says it will be up to Dame Sylvia to determine who she wants to speak with. He hopes she will also listen to the tens of thousands of people who didn't have a problem with EQC. Ellie Jones says the inquiry should prepare for a tsunami of submissions.
Firstly, I think people feel that it's their right, that there's, that it's cathartic almost to be able to get this stuff off our chest and communicate it, because some people just haven't been listened to. But also, too, I think people feel they have got real value to add to an inquiry like this in helping to inform the outcome of it. So, yes, I think there's going to be a huge flood of people, and bring it on.
The inquiry will present its first report to the Governor-General by the end of June next year. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Katie Todd.
Social media has lit up with tributes to the man who helped usher in a new era of superhero storytelling. Marvel Comics legend Stan Lee has died at age 95. He dreamed up superheroes such as Spider-Man, the Hulk and Iron Man, giving them superpowers but also some humanity along the way. Marvel characters are known the world over and its films have become huge successes. The BBC's Lezo Mazumba has this look back at Stan Lee's life and achievements.
Spider-Man.
In comics,
Does whatever a spider can.
in cartoons, in cinema. Stan Lee's creations have captivated fans for decades. He started in publishing in the 1930s at the company that would eventually evolve into Marvel, and where he helped create the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Black Panther, the X-Men, the Avengers, and so many more.
I would be writing these stories along with the artists we'd be working with, and we would all be hoping somebody would buy the comic books so that we could keep our jobs and pay the rent and not be thrown out in the street. But we never for a minute could have envisioned anything like what happened to these characters.
Two-dimensional on the page, Stan Lee's creations were thoroughly three-dimensional characters. Take Spider-Man, driven by guilt over not preventing the death of his uncle.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
It was inevitable that first TV, then Hollywood would come calling. And Stan Lee's frequent cameos, a constant on-screen reminder that he was consulted about the direction of the stories and their often imperfect stars.
Yeah, big man in a suit of armor. Take that off, what are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Echoing their comic book origins, they had frequent conflicts. Superheroes who fought together as often as they fought each other. And that's the real reason his characters still fill our comic books and soar across our screens. Stan Lee, one of entertainment's most important ever figures, was a trailblazer.
That is hilarious.
He was the first comic book writer to understand that the human behind the mask was much more interesting, much more important than the mask itself.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
And that was Stan Lee himself in a cameo from the film Spider-Man, ending Lezo Mazumba's report there. The Forestry Minister, Shane Jones, says stumbling blocks are to be expected with the government's tree planting business after it emerged that 400,000 seedlings went to waste in Northland. The cost to the taxpayer for the mulched seedlings is about $160,000 after Ngāti Hine forestry land was found to be too wild to plant all of the 1.2 million seedlings that had been purchased. The opposition says the bungle shows the lax rules that are in place around the 1 billion trees program. Here's our political reporter, Joe Moyer.
A deal was done between the Crown and the Ngāti Hine Trust in May to plant pine trees and manuka on 3,500 hectares of iwi land. Shane Jones says the 1.2 million seedlings were bought based on both Ngāti Hine and officials' assessments of the land, which turned out to be less than reliable.
Well, the land is untamed land. It's wild, and obviously the analysis which was done on the ground was a lot more ambitious in terms of what could be delivered upon.
Mr Jones says he's been clear with officials involved in the botch-up that it's not good enough. Ngāti Hine has put its hand up, with the Trust Chair, Peter Tipene, saying he's ultimately responsible.
What the taxpayer and the government can be assured of is that the total number of hectares over the years will be planted as we've planned. It's just that we made a little bit of a blue in 2018 and being overzealous in our planning.
Mr Tipene says it's not the end of the world because the land will still be there next year and it will be ready to be planted, albeit later than the government hoped for. Only 200,000 seedlings managed to be successfully planted. The remaining 600,000 have been redistributed to other land. Mr Jones says the Ngāti Hine fiasco was a combination of untamed land and the government having been out of the forestry business for so long.
The Ngāti Hine situation is challenging, not just because of the tameless nature of the land, including the owners, but the fact of the matter is we've started from a very low base because the Crown's been out of this kind of business for nigh on 25, 30 years.
National's Economic and Regional Development spokesman, Paul Goldsmith, says Shane Jones has a cavalier attitude to the large sums of money he's responsible for. He says the land not being ready for the amount of seedlings purchased shows rank incompetence. While Mr Goldsmith says there is a place for a tree planting program, this government is rushing through it and failing in the process.
What's happened in this government is that they've taken it about 10 extra steps and they're doing it at a rapid pace, and I think that's where the difficulties they're running into. And it's all around the politicisation of this, spending $3 billion as quickly as possible so that Shane Jones can wave his flag. And that's not the way that we should be going about spending such large sums of money.
In August, Shane Jones announced Cabinet had approved the creation of a new grants program and partnership fund to get more trees in the ground and provide training and employment opportunities. The Provincial Growth Fund, which Mr Jones oversees, has committed $240 million to the initiatives, but information released by Treasury today reveals officials told Cabinet not to push ahead. Mr Jones has put that down to Treasury being Treasury.
Treasury, I think, gave some predictable cautionary remarks, and have been taken into account. The grant scheme, which will have a value well over $100 million, has been laboriously developed to ensure that it's the right tree, right place, right time.
In a briefing paper to the Finance Minister, Treasury warns there isn't enough detail about the grants to be able to sign off on it. But Mr Jones says a panel of ministers have been working on it and all will be revealed in a couple of weeks. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
The New Zealand Qualifications Authority is now unlikely to reach its target of having NCEA exams completed online by 2020. A computer glitch interrupted a pilot Level 1 digital English exam yesterday, which more than 3,500 students were registered to take part in. But a secondary school principal says technical difficulties aren't the only hurdle to achieving the 2020 goal. Katie Scotcher reports.
Some 46,000 students sat yesterday's Level 1 English exams, but for the 3,600 students doing the digital pilot, things didn't all go to plan. Just over 2 hours in, a computer glitch froze the screen for more than 20 minutes before it was cleared and students could get on with the exam. NZQA says the issue was fixed within 10 minutes and the exam was extended to make up any time lost. But Hayley Sarank, a Year 11 Kapiti College student, says it was a major disruption.
I know people who actually did lose their work and people who were very frustrated that this even happened because they think that it has affected them and they're worried that it will affect their grade.
Kapiti College Principal Tony Kane says the glitch was avoidable.
This is an utterly known quantity. Whoever was administering that part of it knows exactly how many students are going to be online at that time, and that, in days when millions and millions of transactions happen every day, surely 3,500 kids on a digital exam is not a big ask.
Year 11 students at Auckland's Pakuranga College also had their exam interrupted by the glitch. The school's principal, Mike Williams, says quite a few students were stressed by it. NZQA is investigating digital assessment methods with the aim of having NCEA examinations available online by 2020. But Mr Williams says the aim to go digital then is optimistic.
Invariably, we need to be in a better place, but I don't know that we will ever get to a place with digital devices where they never crash. It is implicit in the devices that there are hiccups. What we need to be able to avoid is when we have mass online exam, that the system is more robust.
But Mr Williams says technical difficulties aren't the biggest challenge standing in the way of the digital push.
While there will always be these technical things to resolve, and every step of the trials and pilots we learn more about the process, the biggest challenge for 2020 will be the equity issues across New Zealand of how do we provide an equitable learning environment for all students, so giving all students access to devices, not just for an exam, but for their learning.
NZQA's Andrea Gray says it's unlikely all exams will be digital by 2020.
We are seeing that the types of things that we would need to be able to see, like technology to undertake things like mathematics examinations successfully, may or may not be in wide use in schools. So we're not going to rush, but we are able to implement most of the text-based examinations next year and some of the foreign language ones the following year.
Ms Gray says NCEA digital exams will remain optional for the foreseeable future. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
New Zealand Football has formally apologised to the football ferns for the bullying behaviour of former coach Andreas Heraf. 4 members of the governing body met with the team this morning in the wake of an independent review which found Heraf engaged in bullying behaviour and that complaints from 12 players were genuine and largely substantiated. Heraf resigned in July before the review was published. The chief executive of New Zealand Football, Andy Martin, resigned in June. Veteran football fern Sarah Gregarious told sports editor Stephen Hewson that prior to the apology, the team got together to discuss the past few months.
I've never had to go through anything like this before, so it was brand new for everyone, but it was just sort of like facing up and being together and everybody having the opportunity to discuss things from their point of view and really listening and then just sort of talking a little bit about the future as well. So it was quite all-encompassing. It was a really big day, but a really positive day.
Emotional at times?
Yeah, look, there were certainly elements of that for sure.
New Zealand Football has said that wanted to make an informal apology. Has that happened?
Yes, that took place this morning.
And how did that unfold?
Yeah, it was that we had a co come in and people from New Zealand Football, and it was, again, like just really honest and open, and I certainly felt for myself that it was really heartfelt, and I think the beginning of a different type of relationship compared to the one we've had in the past. I think we've never had that many members of ExCo, even in the environment before, and definitely not speaking as frankly as we were this morning. So no, it was really great.
And what did they say to you?
Oh, well, we had the apology side of things and yeah, just different, obviously, introductions first and foremost, and yeah, just different perspectives again on the things that have happened.
And you're confident it was heartfelt and there is a desire to improve things?
Yes, for sure, and I'm really optimistic that things will improve and there have been measures in place to make sure that, you know, no team has to go through what we've been through and that the organisation itself doesn't have to go through that again. So for me, definitely thought it was genuine and authentic, and I think it's going to be a really great turning point.
Is it difficult coming in the sense that the chief executive has gone, the coach has gone, and the chair has gone, who were all part of that, I suppose, the previous environment? So the apology perhaps not coming from them, is that something you would like to see?
No, I think for me, we want to work with the people that are going to be there in the future. I think for us, it's certainly about looking forward, and those people aren't part of the future, so there probably wouldn't be much point in having those conversations with them. So I'm really comfortable with the people that were there, and I think that's kind of the theme of it, you know, it's moving towards a better future, and to do that, it was probably going to require new people, and that's what we've got.
Sarah Gregorius talking to sports editor Stephen Hewson. Beekeeping is being hailed as the country's new gold rush, so much so that the industry is now on the skills shortage list. But there's a scheme in place to get the unemployed skilled up and back into work as part of a new batch of beekeepers. One group of long-term unemployed are now preparing to graduate, and our reporter Dan Dalgetty suited up and went along to check on their progress.
Beekeeping is buzzing, and for good reason too. Beekeepers are in high demand, so much so it's on the country's skills shortage list. In the Wellington suburb of Island Bay, the Ministry of Social Development has joined forces with the Agricultural Training Centre Taretahi in the Tapu Te Ranga Marae to work with the long-term unemployed. It's the brainchild of Dean Stewart, who says the industry is booming, and his students, who are aged between 18 and 49, are catching swarms of bees and building apiaries. He says a recent law change has opened up more opportunities for locals.
It's the new gold rush. There's a big shortage of beekeepers. What they've been doing in the past is importing them, so getting from the Philippines and places like that. Well, now the law has changed and they can't do that anymore, which is good for Kiwis as a whole.
Ron Love has been on the dole since May. He says he loves the job despite copping the odd blow.
Well, I've had one sting. It got me right in the thumb, right in the joint. I think they seem to know where the joints are and where your vulnerable places are, and they come and give you a nice little sting there.
Classmate Jesse Regan was working in hospitality and retail before he joined the training program. He says beekeepers have to be strong.
I'm not the strongest sort of guy yet. I've been doing the push-ups every day, but I still got to build up a bit of muscle. Sometimes you have to carry just 30 kgs hives many times in a night, so I'm still not sure if it's the right fit for me, but I'm definitely interested about learning more about it.
Dean Stewart says it's a case of finding something that interests people.
We got guys that the system had got rid of, i.e. the mongrel mob, you know, black power, people like that, so we started working with them. We found that by getting alongside them and just finding that switch, once you found that switch, they were away.
Ron Love knows he still has a lot to learn, but is already thinking big.
We're going to start our own firm, have 5 million hives and make billions of dollars. Ultimately, that's what we'd really want to do, but chances are we're going to start off with a pre-established firm that's got everything already up and running, and then learn a bit more about the actual hands-on stuff of maybe processing the honey, getting it out of the honeycomb.
While students have mainly been learning about beekeeping, they've also been immersed in Māori culture, performing a haka and learning how to use a taiaha. The group graduate with their bee caps in hand on Thursday. In Porneke for Checkpoint, ko Dan Dalgetty tēnei.
Time now for a bit of your feedback. Earlier in the show, we spoke to Karel Sroubek's mother, Melia. He, of course, is the convicted drug smuggler who is at the centre of a highly political immigration stoush. She confirmed that he did actually return to the Czech Republic in 2009, despite claiming that his life would be in danger if he went home. Some of your feedback on that interview. Why are we looking to give Karel Sroubek, who has a criminal history, access to live here, this person says, when there are so many law-abiding refugees desperate to get in? We need to be more discerning as a country. Someone else has written to us saying, what are you thinking interviewing a Czech drug smuggler's mum? Of course she is going to say he is a good boy and deserves a second chance. And this one, I don't want to listen to this mother or a mother of a convicted criminal, New Zealand can give so many more deserving people than Karel Sroubek residency. Now, Mila, Karel Sroubek's mother, has talked about the fact that he went home in 2009. She says he was highly homesick. He wanted to see his family. It was a poor decision on his part and made by a young man who was desperate to see his parents. They said that they told him to leave the country immediately and that he had only stayed one night. The reason this is relevant is because he has said all along he can't be deported because his life would be in danger. This person says, we judge him on his record and it is only a criminal one. Of course his mother thinks he's an angel. Don't all mothers think the same of their children? There are many prospective immigrants who could really contribute. He will have cost us $1 million by the time he finishes his sentence. Remembering he's been jailed for 5 years, 9 months for smuggling ecstasy. This person says he's a gang member and imported ecstasy. What are you thinking? So very strong feelings there about Karel Sroubek and the interview that we did with his mother, Mila. Keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101 on the text. After 6 tonight, we'll have details on why homeowners in one of Auckland's newest developments will be charged at least $1,000 a year for 35 years to pay for roads, pipes, streetlights and 2 bridges. We return to the United States, where the deadliest wildfires in the history of California continue to rage across the state, and the winds are rising, and that spells bad news for the thousands of firefighters trying to bring those fires under control. But first, it's time for the news.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. Karel Sroubek's mother Mila has confirmed he returned to the Czech Republic in 2009 for one night. The convicted drug smuggler is at the centre of a controversial decision by the Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway not to deport Sroubek and has ordered a review. The minister has refused to discuss the reasoning behind his decision, but Sroubek's mother Mila said her son's life would be in danger if he returned home using his real name. She told Checkpoint via a translator that he returned home briefly under a fake name.
It was his impulsive decision at that moment because he was very homesick, but we insisted that he immediately return to Germany.
Karel Sroubek's mother, Mila. The Chief District Court judge says the ongoing industrial dispute between the Ministry of Justice and its employees may lead to a miscarriage of justice. Strike action has disrupted court proceedings for months as the Ministry of Justice negotiates a new contract with the union. Annika Smith reports.
More than 2,000 PSA members have taken action over the past 8 weeks, and there's no sign of them letting up. Sitting hours in some courthouses are being slashed amid work to rule action. That's holding up cases and keeping people in custody longer. The Chief District Court Judge Jan-Marie Doog says she's concerned the ongoing industrial dispute may be causing undue delays. She says if people can't appear before a judge and have their bail application heard, it's a breach of their human rights. Ko Annika Smith, Tēnei.
More people buying houses in new Auckland housing developments could get an annual bill for the cost of infrastructure. The government and the Auckland Council have announced a $91 million infrastructure fund for a 9,000 home development in the north of the city. But the eventual homeowners will pay most of that back at least $1,000 a year for the next 35 years. The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford, says it's likely there'll be more schemes like this because it will get houses built more quickly.
Auckland has a shortage of 45,000 houses right now. We urgently need to build our way out of the national housing crisis. This way of financing infrastructure is going to allow us to do that.
The Housing Minister, Phil Twyford. The primary teachers' strikes have so far closed more than half North Island schools. The Education Ministry says 772 schools have notified it that they were closed for instruction yesterday and today. Our Education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The ministry says at 9:30 this morning, 545 or 67% of the 805 North Island schools that employ union members had said they would be closed today. It says the figure for yesterday's strike in Auckland was 217 out of 421 Auckland schools, or 51%. It estimates 8,600 teachers joined today's North Island strike and 7,900 participated in the Auckland industrial action. The rolling one-day strikes move on to the Christchurch area tomorrow, the remainder of the South Island on Thursday, finishing in the Wellington region on Friday. Called John Gerritsen, Tēnei.
The former Canterbury Rebuild Minister Jerry Brownlee hopes the inquiry into EQC also listens to the many people satisfied with their dealings with the agency. Who will head a public inquiry into EQC and its terms of reference have been announced today. Jerry Brownlee says the inquiry head, Dame Sylvia Cartwright, has described it as largely a listening exercise, and he hopes the inquiry will also listen to the tens of thousands of people he says were satisfied with EQC. He says people have forgotten that following the earthquakes there were widespread fears about high inflation and cowboy builders. Mr Brownlee says some jobs did not work out as they should have, but overall the EQC repair process was positive. A local who lives 200 metres away from a fatal fiery crash in the central North Island says it was a shocking scene. Emergency services were called at about 2:30 this morning after a car and a heavy truck crashed on State Highway 1 north of Atiamuri. The driver of the car died. A local resident, Gillian Curley, heard a loud bang in the early hours and arrived to see the car stuck under the truck. She says the truck driver climbed out of his cab and told them to stand back.
Flames were up over the cab of his truck, and you could see that there's no way that anyone could survive in that car, and you hope they didn't because of the fire.
Mrs Curley says the truck driver told her that the driver of the car had come across the centre line and lost control around the corner. It's nearly 6:05. In sport this evening, the New Zealand all-rounder Sophie Devine has labelled Australia the bullies of women's international cricket, but she insists it's a respectful remark as her team chase the upset win required to stay in contention at the World T20 in the West Indies. The White Ferns' hopes will virtually disappear if they're beaten by three-time champions Australia in Guyana tomorrow. Devine was part of the side beaten 3-0 in Australia in their T20 series last month and says they're looking to redeem themselves.
They've been typical Australians, haven't they? They've been bullies. But I think that's why they're at the top of the world at the moment. They're a great side, they've got great depth, and we're fortunate enough to play a lot of cricket against them and alongside them as well with the Women's Big Bash League as well. So, look, we're really looking forward to it. I think any time you put Kiwis versus the Aussies, it's going to be a big match, and we're absolutely pumped for it.
Sophie Devine. The new Football Ferns coach Tom Simani says the players are ready to move on after a difficult period. New Zealand football has formally apologised to the players for the behaviour of their former coach Andreas Hiraf. The executive committee met with the team this morning after an independent review found Hiraf engaged in bullying behaviour. Simani also met former captain Abby Urseg, who retired in May because of problems with Hiraf, and the pair discussed her potential return to the team. The New Zealand surfer Paige Harrop will return to the top flight of the sport next year, having re-qualified for the World Surf League's full championship. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a resampling of Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks. We begin a BBC series on accidental scientific breakthroughs. This evening, how Viagra turned from a heart tonic to a love potion. And our astronomer Alan Gilmore has a more plausible but less click-worthy explanation for a mystery object seen accelerating away from the sun. Less click-worthy, that is, in it being an alien spacecraft. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast for the country from Met Service, taking us to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday, for Northland and Auckland. Fine for the rest of today. What's left, a few showers tomorrow. Waikato and Coromandel, fine spells and isolated showers. Waitomo to Whanganui, including Central High Country, also Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Fine spells. Showers during the afternoons and evenings, especially inland. Some heavy with isolated thunderstorms and hail. Manawatu to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Nelson and Bulla, mostly fine. Areas of cloud morning and night, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges. Westland mostly sunny. Fiordland fine today, cloudy tomorrow with patchy drizzle. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, areas of cloud morning and night, otherwise fine. However, isolated showers inland during the afternoons and evenings. Mostly sunny in Southland and fine spells in the Chathams. It's nearly 6:08.
Thank you, Paul. Let's return now to where we started the program tonight. The mother of convicted drug smuggler Karel Sroubek has spoken to Checkpoint exclusively tonight, confirming he did return to the Czech Republic in 2009, despite claiming his life may be in danger if he was forced to go home. Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway has come under fire for granting Sroubek residency. He currently is reviewing his decision and declined to be interviewed tonight. Meanwhile, Sroubek is currently serving serving more than 5 years in prison for importing 5 kilos of MDMA with a street value of about $375,000. Sroubek's mother, Mila, came to New Zealand on a visitor's visa for her son's parole hearing. She's urging Mr Lees Galloway to give her son one last chance to prove himself. Now, English is her second language and it is limited for her, so we used a Czech translator to translate her words. Is your son a gangster?
Ne, v žádném případě není gangster.
No, not at all. He is not a gangster.
Gangstera se s něj snaží udělat média.
Media are trying to make him a gangster. He is not a gangster. No way.
Why do you say that?
Protože jsem o tom přesvědčena a neexistují.
Because I am convinced about it, and because there is no proof, and a gangster is something totally different than my son is.
What do you think will happen to him if he is sent home to the Czech Republic?
Já si to vůbec nedokážu ani nechci.
Oh, I can't and even don't want to imagine that it is a terrible.
What do you mean by that?
Protože on svědčil proti člověku, který zavraždil a bylo mu bezprostředně po tom, co se to stalo.
Because he acted as a witness against a person who murdered. Minutes after it happened, he gave his testimony about it to police. And they immediately...
Potom následně byl nucený, bylo mu vyhrožováno, aby tu výpověď změnil.
He was immediately threatened to change his testimony so that the person who committed it, that his sentence would be lowered.
Do you think your son will be physically hurt if he goes home?
Yeah, I am worried. A já se obávám, že ano.
I am afraid, yes.
A máme proto i důkazy, ale indicie, které tomu...
We have indications it would most probably happen.
K tomu s největší pravděpodobností došlo.
What would happen? Do you believe he would be killed?
I ta možnost.
Even that could happen.
Mila told me she was also losing hope her son might be able to stay in New Zealand where she believes he would be safe. Did your son come home to the Czech Republic in 2009? Did he return home?
Bylo to bez našeho vědomí, bylo to na velmi krátkou dobu. Ta cesta byla.
It was without our knowing. It was for a short time and it was to Germany.
Did he come to the Czech Republic though from Germany?
Byl to jeho okamžitý, neuvážený nápad, prostě se mu zastesklo po domovu, což na jednu stranu chápu, ale...
It was his impulsive decision at that moment because he was very homesick, but we insisted that he immediately return to Germany.
To be clear, Mila, did he come into the Czech Republic?
Přijel na krátkou dobu.
He did, for a short time.
Ale bez našeho souhlasu.
But without our consent.
What name did he travel with?
To byl asi ten hlavní důvod, proč to udělal, protože cestoval pod jménem Jan Antolik a pod jinou identitou.
He travelled under someone else's identity, Jan Antolik, and that was the main reason why. And it also offered a little bit of cover.
How long did he stay in the Czech Republic for?
Přes jednu noc a druhý den
One night and he left the next day.
Back to Germany?
Back to Germany.
Can you understand that this looks bad, Mila?
Ano, ano.
Yes.
Ale bylo mu v té době, nevím už přesně kolik, byl mladý a prostě k mládí patří nerozvážnost a
He was young back then and he didn't think straight.
Ale umím se i vžít do toho jeho pocitu, prostě, že se mu opravdu zastesklo.
I can understand his feelings and that he was homesick and wanted to visit his home even for a short time.
And Mila says while she has to accept her son has been convicted in New Zealand, he was paying the consequences. She said if Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway allowed him to stay, he wouldn't break the law again. I know English is hard for you, Mila, but could you try just in a few words in English to tell me your feelings for your son?
I love my son as every parent, and I wish him a better life in the future, safe life with loved partner, and change his life forever. Forever. He is not bad person. I'm sorry for.
How long will you stay here?
I am here for. I planned it short time, but then everything changed, so I decided to stay for a longer time, and I can't leave him in this time because he has nobody here close, so he needs my support. My husband can't be with me here, so I have to stay just me. But I would like to stay for to the some decision and some.
How long can you stay here? How long?
Ja, jsem tady na turistická.
I'm here on a visitor's visa, which allows me to stay for 3 months. And now I would like to apply for an extension for another 3 months.
And that is the mother of Karel Sroubek, the convicted drug smuggler who is at the centre of this ongoing immigration stoush. We're getting a lot of feedback on that interview with Mila. This one, the indignant response from your audience to Sroubek's mother's interview is the inevitable result of the media beat-up on this issue, this person says. Previously, Mr. Woodhouse, Michael Woodhouse, would have made the same decision. We don't extradite Chinese gangsters back to China because it has no human rights guarantee. An hour is all the time an immigration minister would have to consider a file. It should be enough, says Jane. And we'll hopefully get to more of your feedback on that later. Keep it coming. You can get in contact with us on 2101 on the text. Homeowners in one of Auckland's newest developments will be charged at least $1,000 a year for 35 years to pay for roads, pipes, streetlights and 2 bridges. The government and Auckland Council are chipping in $91 million to help pay for infrastructure up front at the Milldale development near Orewa in northern Auckland. They're calling it funding, but those who buy the houses will eventually pay most of it back. Rowan Quinn was at today's announcement.
I don't think so. That is hard. Keep going.
Wearing high-vis and hard hats over their suits, the politicians struggle to even get the tips of their spades into the dirt in a ceremonial sod turning at Milldale. But Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff and the Housing Minister Phil Twyford say it's their funding scheme that's breaking new ground. Mr Goff says the money gives the developer, Fulton Hogan, certainty because infrastructure's an expensive outlay that comes long before homes are sold.
Does infrastructure have to be paid for? Yes, somebody's got to pick up the tab. Without this scheme, this development behind me would not be taking place.
Work's already well underway at Milldale with dozers and diggers carving out roads from what was once countryside. It will eventually have the same population as Blenheim. Greg Jews from Fulton Hogan says that means it has to build a lot more than homes.
We're talking many, many kilometres of water pipes, sewer pipes, fibre, thousands of streetlights. I don't know how many kilometres of roads there'll be, a lot.
He says the money means they can commit to infrastructure beyond the site itself. The fund will pay for a new arterial road and 2 bridges, one that will cross State Highway 1 to link to another new suburb. Mr Twyford says homeowners have always paid for infrastructure in new developments one way or another.
That money won't be added on to the price tag of the new home, which is the way that it normally happens. So it'll start off at about $1,000 a year as an infrastructure payment paid by each of the properties in this new development.
That would rise to $2,000 over 35 years. The council and government say despite that extra cost, the scheme will help with home affordability because the biggest cause of that is not enough houses. More than half the money for the fund comes as an investment by the ACC fund, with the council chipping in $33 million and the government just $4 million directly. Does Mr Goff think that's enough Crown money? Would you like to see these guys chipping in more directly to our bigger city?
It's never enough.
Yeah, I want more, and when I've got more, I want more and more. I'm sure the government's heard that story. Look, we've all got skin in the game. Working together, we can achieve a hell of a lot more than working separately.
He says the scheme's likely to be used at other new housing projects in the future, meaning more homeowners around the city with another big bill to pay each year. I tāmaki Makaurau mō Checkpoint, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
The deadliest wildfires in the history of California continue to rage across the state, and the winds are rising, and that's bad news for the thousands of firefighters trying to bring them under control. The most destructive blaze remains the Camp Fire in Northern California, but other fires are destroying properties north of Los Angeles. There are now more than 40 people confirmed dead and thousands of homes have been destroyed. The BBC's Dan Johnson is on the scene in Simi Valley on the northwest fringe of Los Angeles.
They're called the devil winds, and they're doing the devil's work. A hot, dry breeze that carries a wall of flame over these hills, straight through anything in its way. Thousands of homes have burnt to the ground, some gone in a matter of minutes. Here in Malibu, leafy coastal neighbourhoods have been charred to ash.
The wind blew across it, and that firestorm started coming down the hill here, and we had to run to the ocean, and then it just blew through here and like a tornado.
The rich and famous haven't been spared.
Welcome to my home in Malibu.
This is film star Gerard Butler returning home to find there's very little left.
This guy right here, Tyler, saved the whole block. No.
And on the edge of Calabasas, neighbours who ran for their lives were today reunited.
He put that tree out right there.
Tyler and his wife saw homes across the street burning, so he got his family to safety, then stayed to fight back the flames with his garden hose.
There was a point when I was standing on the roof saying, I'm not going to make it out of here, because the fire had surrounded us, and so...
You thought you were going to die?
Oh yeah, 100%, and I was looking at a way to get away, and the only way I could have gotten away is jumped off my back roof.
It appears that they're starting to get a handle on it, despite the winds coming out of the...
And today, others were at risk as the winds drove the flames on, taking more ground, threatening more homes.
They're using every tool they've got. There are thousands of firefighters out on the ground, and they've had success here. They've beaten back the flames, but the problem is new fires keep breaking out.
And there's a warning, Californians may have to learn to live with this.
This is not the new normal, this is the new abnormal. And this new abnormal will continue, certainly in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years.
Containing the fires is the priority and counting the lives lost. But the winds have picked up once more, 5 days in, and the Golden State still burns.
Dan Johnson from Malibu there in Southern California. There's been pushback in Australia following the Prime Minister's call for the Muslim community to do more to stop terrorism. It follows the deadly attack in Bourke Street in Melbourne on Friday when Somali-born Hassan Khalif Shire Ali stabbed 3 men and set his vehicle on fire before being shot by police. 74-year-old barrister and well-known icon Sisto Malaspina died at the scene. His family has accepted an offer for a state funeral. But in the wake of the attack, Prime Minister Scott Morrison urged the Muslim community to be more proactive in tackling terrorism. That has drawn the ire of Islamic leaders who say they're already working hard to fight radical extremism. The ABC's Jess Davis reports.
Pellegrini's Espresso Bar on Melbourne's Bourke Street is giving away free long blacks to customers today in honour of co-owner Sisto Malaspina, who died in last week's terror attack. A steady stream of people has been pouring through the doors to pay their respects to the well-known icon, including Prime Minister Scott Morrison.
It's the job of communities to protect themselves and to keep the wolves from coming in amongst the sheep in their own religious communities.
But leaders in Melbourne's Muslim community say they're already working tirelessly to stop radicalisation. The federal electorate of Wills in the northern suburbs of Melbourne is home to a large Muslim community. The Labor MP Peter Khalil says there has been a lot of sadness and frustration.
And so there is a degree of frustration, I think, there about the fact that they're constantly called upon to do more. They are doing a lot, and I see this firsthand. I work with many of the communities in my electorate, and they're doing everything they can because it's about their struggle as much as our struggle. We're actually in this together.
He says the debate over whether the attacker acted because of mental illness or terrorism misses the point.
Radicalisation works on vulnerable people. In many respects, they're the shock troops, that those that have that latent anger or have problems or weaknesses, they are manipulated, they are brought into this perverted definition of Islam and this minority, and then used as the shock troops to conduct that violence.
Kurunda Sayat is a former secretary of the Islamic Council of Victoria and founder of Forum on Australia's Islamic Relations. He told Radio National the Muslim community is already working together with police and security authorities to prevent radicalisation, but that it's difficult for families.
First thing in their mind is that they don't want their son to come under the concern of the police and possibly be arrested. I mean, it's a catch-22. They're not going to willingly give up their son if they think that he could be arrested, not for a terrorist attack, just because he's acting irrationally.
And that is Kurunda Sayat from the Forum on Australia-Islam Relations, ending that report from the ABC. Time now to go to some of your feedback, and there is lots of it. Now, this is in relation to the interview that I did with Mila, Karel Sroubek's mother, and he's obviously the convicted drug dealer who is at the centre of this political immigration stoush. Ian Lees-Galloway, the minister, is reviewing the decision to allow him to stay in the country at the moment. So, this from Linda. She says, my first husband, Karel, was a genuine Czech refugee, she says, who really did have fear returning to his country. In 1968, New Zealand took in about 300 Czech families who fled the country after Russian tanks rolled in and shut down the country's government, she says. This guy is a drug smuggler and a liar and should not be allowed into this country. He is a disgrace to the Czech families who came to this country in 1968, who worked hard, having left everything behind them to start life again. The Czech Republic, she says, nowadays is a very different country to what it was years ago, and there are no grounds for him to fear for his life. That from Linda. And this interview has sparked some very strong feelings from you. Another one from Sue. Karel Sroubek, leave the subject alone. Sue says, it is completely political, with National trying to force the resignation of a Labor minister. That is National's sole aim in this case, she says. There will be reasons to do with his court case that can't be made public, and Lees-Galloway will have made the best decision, says Sue. No sympathy for the Czech mother. He came here illegally, this person says, committed crimes while he was here, and is costing New Zealand money every day he is in prison. He needs to be deported immediately. End of story, they say. He's been sentenced to almost 6 years in jail and is currently serving that term. And this one, about the convicted drug smuggler on today's news item. I am disgusted to hear his mother's point of view, as if we, the New Zealand public, should have sympathy with or for her and her criminal son. I don't have sympathy for her or her son, who had no sympathy or pity for the drug addicts that he supplied drugs to, this person says. He should be sent packing back to where he came from forthwith. And Karel Sroubek's mother is pleading with the Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, to give her son one more chance and allow him to stay on in New Zealand. Tributes are pouring in following the death of Stan Lee, who dreamed up Spider-Man, the Hulk and a host of other Marvel comic superheroes that became mythic figures in pop culture. Gavino Garay from Reuters reports.
Stan Lee, the man who brought Spider-Man, Iron Man, the Hulk and a host of other Marvel comic superheroes to life, has died. He reportedly passed away at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 95. As a writer and editor, Lee was key to the development of Marvel into a comic book giant in the 1960s. Beyond his comic book genius, many of his mythic figures like X-Men and Iron Man also saw enormous success at the movie box office, generating hundreds of millions of dollars.
It was just pen and ink drawings on a page, and now it's one of the most exciting movies I've ever seen.
In 2002, Lee sued Marvel for his 10% share in profits from Spider-Man and received a $10 million settlement. Among his accolades, Lee received the National Medal of Arts in 2008, the highest government award for creative artists. Lee was widely credited with adding a new layer of complexity and humanity to superheroes. They had relatable worries about love and money and endured tragic flaws or feelings of insecurity. Lee, the son of Jewish immigrants from Romania, once said that he didn't have hundreds of millions of dollars, but that he was happy enough to get a nice paycheck and be treated well.
We have just enough time for some of your feedback. And to be fair to Matt, who has emailed us or texted us earlier about the trees. Matt, we're going to get to you now. Matt is saying that the 400,000 seedlings lost is minimal, considering the previous government wasted $27 million on a flag referendum. The story he's referring to is the one about taxpayers having to foot the bill for 400,000 seedlings that have gone to waste in Northland. That's because the land that they were supposed to be planted on was a bit rugged. It was part of the 1 billion trees program, but not all of those trees could be planted. So those 400,000 seedlings, the taxpayer is bearing the brunt of the cost of those. But overwhelmingly, you want to talk to us about the story of Karel Sroubek and the interview we did with his mother. This from Adele. Immigration shambles for Mr. Sroubek. We have a choice of who we allow to come and live in New Zealand. Why are we trying to defend someone who is far less than desirable? It smells like he has friends in special places, says Adele. This one from Tom, who hails from Wellington. I am still waiting for our Prime Minister to explain what she meant when she advised New Zealanders to read between the lines regarding the decision to let our now infamous Czech guest remain here. Does she mean that there are security or intelligence matters involved? Tom, you would have heard Karel Sroubek's mother say he fears for his life because he was a witness in a murder case. And finally, there are people already in the country trying to get their stay extended to earn an honest penny for themselves. They have to jump through hoops of fire with immigration. So I take that as someone else who is not keen on Karel Sroubek staying on. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Checkpoint for this evening. We will be back with you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Karel Sroubek, his mother, has confirmed the drug smuggler returned to the Czech Republic under his assumed name Jan Antonik for one night in 2009. The Chief District Court judge says hearing delays due to an unresolved industrial dispute may lead to a miscarriage of justice. Dame Sylvia Cartwright is promising her inquiry into the EQC is not about reputations or liability, but gives people the chance to say what went wrong and what needs fixing. The primary teachers' strikes have so far closed more than half of North Island schools, and a woman who lives near a fiery fatal crash near Atiamuri says it was a shocking scene. Those are the headlines. Our next news bulletin will be at 7 o'clock.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.
The NZDI should be considering very carefully where they go from here,
including the latest national and